Hello and welcome to another episode of Majlis and Markets. I am your host Hassan. Majlis and Markets aims to bring you thought-provoking conversations with influential leaders in Islamic and global markets. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to thank everybody who downloaded our second episode, our conversation with Dr. Isama Tawari, who gave us a fascinating insight into Kuwait. Today, we're moving eastwards and heading towards Uzbekistan. Nestled between the vast expanses of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan and Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan finds itself at the crossroad of cultures, a meeting point of ancient traditions and modern aspirations. Over the last 6 years, the country has witnessed something of a reform agenda and has been a success story both in economics and foreign direct investment. Since the passing of Islam Karimov, the country's first president in 2016, and the appointment of Shavkat Mirziyoyev, the former prime minister, Uzbekistan has been liberalizing its centrally planned economy and transitioning to a more free market economy. In 2017, Uzbekistan attracted $1.73 billion in FDI inflows. That increased to $2.53 billion in 2022, according to the World Investment Report commissioned by the UN. The country also has positive economic indicators, including low public debt levels, and is projected to grow around 5.5% in 2023, according to the IMF. Uzbekistan's economy has a lot of features that make it an attractive investment proposition. However, there are challenges looming ahead, including the impact from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a faltering global economy, and increasing geopolitical risk. My guest today is a well-known figure in Uzbekistan's economic and financial transition. Odilbek Isakov served as the country's deputy finance minister from 2019 to 2023. Prior to this, he served as advisor to the minister and head of the newly established Debt Management Office in September 2018. Before joining the Ministry of Finance, Odilbek had a 12-year career at HSBC, where he focused primarily on emerging markets debt capital markets. He is currently the CEO and co-founder of Infrasia Capital, an advisory firm based in London and Tashkent, focused on infrastructure projects in Uzbekistan and other frontier markets. During our conversation, I spoke with Odilbek about some of the economic reforms taking place, as well as the opportunities for foreign companies and investors. We also touched on other topics, including the potential of Islamic finance, the opportunities for sukuk, and climate risks facing Uzbekistan. So, Odilbek, I've invited you here today to talk about your country, Uzbekistan. We spoke in our last episode of Dr. Isama Tawari on Kuwait, but obviously we're going to talk about Uzbekistan today. Obviously, since late 2016, early 2017, Uzbekistan has been something of a rising star within the foreign direct investment world, as I mentioned in the introduction. It's managed to increase the inflows coming to the country over the past 6 years. It's done a lot of things. I think none of the least of reforms that were done or started happening in 2016-17 was the free float of the local currency. The easing of visa restrictions and improving the framework for local, regional, and global investors. And I think obviously the results are quite compelling, as I mentioned. Maybe you could walk us through what the country has been up to in the last 6 or 7 years.
Certainly, Hassan. Thanks again for inviting me here, and thanks again for dedicating one of your podcasts to Uzbekistan. Clearly, the country has been doing a lot of major structural reforms under President Mirziyoyev since late 2016, and I think that again 7 years is for some reforms it's a long enough time. Some reforms it's short time, but in my opinion, the progress, the speed, the pace of reforms have been very, very fast, faster than you would otherwise see in other emerging markets countries. I think if you talk about the economics, I think that this economic growth has been one of the key, let's say, results of these reforms, and I'll tell you why. Economic growth in general is widely accepted as an indicator that the government and the country is doing well. Economic growth that's how the wealth is generated. That's how the prosperity is ensured for the people. Inclusive economic growth is another important factor where obviously a country also dealing with poverty reduction. Uzbekistan is doing everything in parallel. And as you know, in your introduction, you mentioned about liberalization. Liberalization is very important for economic growth. Liberalization of FX market, yes, 2017 September. That was the big bang of how the actual banking and financial markets have started working like in a normal market economy, because currency has been floated then. Or if you look at the liberalization of fuel, the liberalization of wheat, bread prices, again, in the coming years and quarters, that helped fuel efficiency. Because when you have a price which is controlled by the government, then there's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of deficit, a lot of state interference to keep the prices low. But when you leave it to market forces, then its supply and demand dynamics will ensure there's sufficient amount produced and sufficient price is achieved. As simple as that. I mean, this theory. I mean, which is quite important. And if you go to a university and look at the macroeconomics textbook, this is how obviously I've seen it in real life, how this thing really helps unleash this potential, unleash the creative nature of people and firms, or we call it economic agents, to create and basically and enhance the way they work, the way they invest, the way they consume, the way they make decisions. So I've seen it firsthand, and if you look at the growth figures, very, very important, impressive, 5% plus, growth that we've had, since 2017, and overall average growth was 5.3%, despite COVID. COVID was obviously, like in many countries, was kind of a quite a shock to the system, but COVID, we grew by 1.7%. It wasn't negative growth; it was a positive growth. 2021 was 7.4%, for instance, if you look at the gross numbers, and of course 2022 it was 5.7%, and it's expected that 23 numbers will be close to 6%.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's obviously on the growth side. If I may also point out some of the key reforms where country again is pushing hard, and President Mirziyoyev is quite keen to make sure that reforms are reversible. If you look at the SOE reforms, privatization, pretty impressive actually. 7 years ago, none of the SOEs were able to borrow or for the investment purposes without government guarantee or without government's interference. Nowadays, over 10 companies and most of the banks, state-owned banks, they have international IFRS reporting. They have a good level of corporate governance, independent board members, and management focused on profits and good performance. And now I would say majority of our SOEs are bankable. They can borrow money. They can set up joint ventures. They can finance new investment projects. It's also another strength, in my opinion. Of course, as and when most of them will be either fully or partially IPO'd or partially privatized. But even now, the focus is to make sure that they're not sort of burdens to the government, but they're actually doing well themselves and they're bankable.
Yes.
Also, Hassan, yes, please.
No, I was just I'm fascinated by Uzbekistan. From the journey. Obviously, you grew up under before this whole reform agenda. How unprecedented is this reform agenda that's been done since 2016-17? Has it been like something quite unprecedented for the country and for?
I think yes. I think it was unprecedented. Looking at across different I mean, I'm only talking about economics and investments or SOE reforms.
Sure,
But
sure.
if you look at actually the governance reforms, creation of anti-corruption agency, and measures to push the current the basically fight against corruption, or if you look at other governance indicators, again from a low base, but the country has been doing very well. If you look at the World Bank governance indicators, for instance,
Yes.
21, 20, and we've been up on the regulatory quality. Uzbekistan is up by 33 places, political stability up by 19 places, government effectiveness up by 22 places. Look, I mean, very important focus has been again to make sure that ordinary person, the man on the street, average Joe, let's say, or average Hassan, for instance, in Uzbekistan, will
Yes.
feel the reforms and will feel the difference. And it is the case nowadays. Of course, not without problems, of course, but in general, fast track 7 years, people are way better off than they were back in 2016.
Yeah, I think also compared to your Central Asian neighbors, I think Uzbekistan is doing better in a lot of categories, right? And in terms of quality of life and economic prosperity when compared to some of the other neighboring countries.
Look, I mean, we are the largest country in terms of population, and of course, reforms. And our president has been quite adamant to involve our neighbors in the reform process. In general, good neighborly relationships as well. Back in the days, we used to have visa regimes with some of our neighbors. Nowadays, we don't have these visa regimes, unless, of course, with Turkmenistan, where they insist having on visa regimes. And just speaking of that, we used to even have a request 2-year exit visa from the government to go to London or to go to other places.
Yes.
Now this is abolished. I mean, or in Tashkent, the capital city, people it was impossible to get permanent, let's say, a residence permit. On one country, Tashkent is a separate from the rest of it. And it was next to impossible unless you are like invited by the ministries or something like that. But nowadays, this system is abolished as well. So a lot of communist era things have restrictions have been abolished, and people have been much more free to move around in the country and outside of the country. And again, speaking of our neighboring countries, I mean, President's first official visit was in Central Asia. His first visit, when he was elected, was Turkmenistan. Second time he was elected, it was Kazakhstan. And of course, with Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, with the GCC countries, with Turkey, with European Union, US, China, Russia, we have relationships which are in all-time best. So again, I think many people see that in Uzbekistan, this dynamism, and they look at it and they try to also have similar policies or try, because what's happening in Uzbekistan will impact the region for sure, and they see how things are moving and countries are doing similar reforms as well.
Yes. Yeah, very good. Odilbek, with Uzbekistan, obviously you played a significant role and an influential role in the opening of the capital markets, not just domestically but also internationally. Uzbekistan tapping the international capital markets, I think in 2019 or maybe before that a little bit. Could you maybe give us a little snapshot of Uzbekistan's journey within the debt capital markets?
Yes, it was very good. I myself is a DCM banker.
Yes.
Previously, before joining the government, I had been advising governments to issue bonds and also raise capital in international markets. So, and it was always, for me, it was Uzbekistan's capital markets issuance was a question of time. Yes. Because not just because Uzbekistan needs to attract a lot of capital to finance its infrastructure and to finance its growth, but also, this is also an important step and it's an important message to the whole world that Uzbekistan is open for business. You go to capital markets, right? Yes, it was an interesting journey. I mean, when I joined the government in 2018 as minister's advisor, finance minister's advisor initially, and head of debt management office, we set up the debt management office at that time, and we looked at initially, obviously, you need to get credit ratings, then of course do the marketing, then the bond.
Very different from your banking career, I can imagine, like with more established, sophisticated.
In a way, not so much, because I was on the other side. I was on the banker's side, helping the governments issue debut bonds and stuff like that.
So you had so you had all this experience of like
yes, but not from the government side, of course, but on the other side.
Yeah, from the arranging side.
Yeah, and it was obviously harder, much harder than advising. Doing is harder than advising, by the way. No, look, but I mean, the team was great. Everyone supported the minister and the whole ministry, other government agencies which are important. Central Bank, of course, is quite key, quite important member of every roadshows and every important decisions we make. Together with the central bank, and they were quite open-minded in terms of investor dialogue, communications, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, when we were roadshowing Uzbekistan after achieving BB minus rating, was that everyone in the investor community were looking at Uzbekistan as a country with a lot of potential to grow, a lot of potential to do things better, to improve, and hence they were putting their face in our credit. And I must say that when we were book building, the book was, at one point, it reached $8 billion for a $1 billion offering. So that was quite unprecedented in a way that, this debut attracted so much attention. And I think part of the reason is that even then, back in early 2019, so within 2 years in the job, the president and his team, they managed to convince the whole perception around Uzbekistan. It wasn't just me or my team doing the job. It was actually, obviously, the whole thing was done by basically the management, senior leadership. All the reforms getting done and being implemented was quite important for investors. And when we were on the road, of course, we did a full-blown roadshow. We went to the US, New York, Boston. We spent a couple of days in London, and impressive investor turnout. And of course, this roadshow, a lot of people managed to discover Uzbekistan in much more detail than what they read on paper or what they read on Bloomberg or other news agents.
Yes.
So on the debt side, I think we managed to convince them on the story, and hence the very strong, let's say, sponsorship by the investor community. Fast forward now since 2019, so fast forward 4 years. We continued visiting the market. We continued issuing bonds in dollars, of course, but now we moved more towards thematic bonds. In 2020, we issued conventional dollars, but we also offered first ever Uzbek Sum denominated bonds. But that was development finance bonds, according to JP Morgan's methodology. This was pretty much SDG, close to SDG.
Sustainable development goals. Sustainable development goals.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yes. In 2021, we issued SDG bonds again in Uzbek Sums. In 2021, 22 was a very difficult market, as you know. After the war, and of course after repeated U.S. interest rate hikes, market was closed to countries like Uzbekistan. So in 2023, when they revisited, they issued green bonds again in Uzbek Sums. So now 3 issuances of Uzbek Sums since 2020. All of them are thematic bonds. Ministry of Finance is delivering impact reports and allocation reports and other reports, and investors were highly commending this detailed reports in terms of where their money was spent and how it's impacting our SDG goals. And they were even more happy, and hence every time the size was getting higher and higher. Initially we did 2 trillion, then 2.5 trillion. This year it was 4.25 trillion.
Yeah.
And that's a journey. And investors are asking the government to do it, to do green bonds or SDG bonds in dollars as well. And fast forward a few years, 4 or 5 years, I would like to see Uzbekistan issuing sukuk bonds. I would like to see Uzbekistan continuing its focus and commitment to SDG goals and issuing more SDG green or sustainable linked bonds. And that's how I think we managed to keep interest to Uzbekistan despite the challenging markets, despite the fact that there's a lot going on, a lot of geopolitical and other type of risks globally and
yeah, there's
specific to emerging. And therefore, I think
sorry,
someone's calling me here.
Yeah, there was a little bit of connection.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. We just had a little bit.
Okay, great.
But yeah, no.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Odilbek, is with regards to the fixed income, have other issuers, non-government issuers, issued from Uzbekistan? Have other corporates or GREs issued?
We had 3 banks and 2 corporates issuing. One bank, Sanat Kurulush Bank, the second largest bank, issued as early as 2019, and then that was November. Then 2020, 2021, NBU came. So 5 issuances altogether. And there's, I think next year there will be more debut and repeat issues coming to the market as well. Of course, interest rates are very high, and not what we saw, what we used to see, and what we used to like. To be honest, we all like those, close to 0% U.S. Treasuries or mid swaps, and with the spread, 3-handle, 4-handle type coupons. We all liked those, but unfortunately, now the reality is very, very different, and of course the coupons are quite high. But nevertheless, companies have high investment needs, and they have projects with high NPVs and high returns, and therefore I think some of them can afford to pay those kind of coupons and still visit the markets.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I know during your time in the Ministry of Finance and also with your time working on the financial sector of Uzbekistan was Islamic finance and sukuk. Could you maybe talk a little bit about sukuk opportunities for Uzbekistan? Because I know that a lot's been talked about Uzbekistan's potential with sukuk and Islamic finance, given the size of its population and given its location and given its history. But how realistic is a sukuk going to help Uzbekistan?
Look, I think sukuk is great. I mean, let me just before sukuk briefly update you in terms of Islamic finance.
Please,
general.
yes, please.
Yes, Uzbekistan is already attracting Islamic loans. Yes, Islamic funding.
Yes.
So murabaha is a common structure.
Okay.
And government, when I was in the government, we managed to get 2 murabaha signed with Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. It's part of Islamic Development Bank.
Yes.
And murabaha is already sort of what we already understand. We got it for our agriculture fund, and it worked pretty well. It even won an award last year, one of the in London. Yes. It was quite a good example. Then banks started taking similar types of loans, murabahas, and it worked as well. So I think now the banks and government is also looking more and more to Islamic finance in general. Now, which is currently works and does not require any sort of big change in the legislation. However, sukuk does require quite a significant change in our legislation. Several laws need to be updated or changed. And obviously a couple of presidential decrees need to be issued. So there is an Islamic Development Bank and UNDP funded grant with several scholars and experts involved in helping Uzbek government to basically put the framework in place. And when I
Yes.
was at the Ministry of Finance, Capital Markets Development Department was in charge of those new initiatives. And now it's the new regulator, National Agency for Prospective Projects, recently took over the role of a regulator, and I think they are currently looking at these issues as well. But
Yeah.
in my opinion, Sukuk is very important. Uzbekistan is already attracting a lot of investors from the Middle East, to its PPP projects from Saudi Arabia, Aqua Power, for instance. They're quite big in our renewable power generation as IPPs, for instance, or Mazda from UAE. Mubadala is also quite focused. Nebras and other names, which are Metito, for instance, from UAE, doing water projects in Uzbekistan. So there's a lot of interest from corporates, already doing business in Uzbekistan. We haven't seen equivalent amount of interest from banks. That's a little bit surprising. And this is partially our fault as well. Perhaps we haven't done enough work to actually attract them to Uzbekistan. I mean, there's a lot of Western banks, a lot of global names are already doing business, Citis and JP Morgans and, Societe Generale, Standard Chartered, you name it, right? All of them, Deutsche Bank, Commerce, Credit Suisse, UBS, all of them are in Uzbekistan. But not the Middle Eastern banks. So it was a bit surprising. And I think
it's a
hopefully
matter of time before they enter the markets, or
it is the right time right now, of course. We are obviously government will be. I was advising the government to support this initial negotiations, perhaps a non-deal roadshow or something like that, just to get things moving, right? And Sukuk would be an ideal instrument. Now, Republic of Philippines issued Sukuk was last week.
Yes.
Major success, right? Major success. And they paid negative initial premium. Economics makes sense. But Uzbekistan issuing Sukuk I'm hoping will have even bigger following than the Philippines because of our significant Muslim population. And I think that some banks are showing us even 50 basis points cheaper cost of funding in Sukuks rather than in conventional funding. So that makes economic and financial sense as well. So I think, yes, I would definitely advise the government to expedite the process of legislative change to allow Sukuk issuance. And of course, I will definitely keep focusing on other types of Islamic products. Last but not least is Islamic finance in Uzbekistan itself, within Uzbekistan, right? Islamic deposits, Islamic Sharia compliant loans, and Sharia compliant financial products. Something we don't have right now, because a lot of people, they don't put their money in the banks in Uzbekistan because of their let's say they want to work with Islamic banks, right? Sharia compliant banks. And this is I think right now a good opportunity for the government to push that side as well, not just focusing on international money, right? International funding in Islamic Sharia compliant manner, but also domestic funding, funding to the banks, funding to the economy in general. Money under the blanket or money in the bank. Look, money in the bank is so much better for the economy and financial intermediation than money under the blanket, right? So we don't want some people to be not being able to use our financial system because we don't have Islamic Sharia compliant banking system. So I think it is a right moment to start thinking about that as well, in my opinion, and that will have a major, great traction, great support from entrepreneurs in Uzbekistan, retail and SME in Uzbekistan.
With the keeping the money under the mattress narrative is that's not uncommon in other countries as well, which don't have a developed banking sector. But is that to do with like the interest rate deposits or earning interest, or is that just because of lack of financial education, do you think?
Well, actually, it could be a bit of both. And the third reason is because we don't have Islamic banking.
Right, right. So it's because it's
Because
conventional. Because it's conventional.
people don't want to, keep their money in the bank because it's a riba, right?
Right, right. So yeah,
So we need to also involve them. It should be our financial system should be inclusive. We
mm,
should we should involve them in our banking system and get their deposits or lend Sharia compliant mortgages and what have you,
mm,
other financial products so that they're fully included in our financial system. So that's obviously another part. But
yeah,
again, just introducing Islamic banking does not solve all the problems
mm,
related to people keeping money under the mattresses. No, but everything progress. Progress requires time. Progress requires a lot of coordinated, let's say, activities.
mm,
So Islamic banking, along with financial literacy programs, aimed at helping people to save and to basically uh, earn profits
yeah.
with their earnings. This kind, and of course, increased trust in the banking system. It's a very
It's a long process.
expans. It's very expansive, very
Mm,
difficult process. I mean, if I again, central bank is doing tremendous job to keep the together with Ministry of Economy and Finance to keep the macroeconomic balance and keep things growing, but also keeping the FX rate more or less stable despite all this economic global events.
mm,
But again, I think we need to take this step, regardless of that. People's trust in the banking system has really risen as well. As we can see, retail deposits are growing in the banking system, which is really good. But the deposit rates are very, very high in Uzbekistan. So people are attracted with those deposit rates. I mean, it's 20, 23, 25% in Uzbek sums, or
mm.
in real, it's like 13, 15% interest rate, which is, I think, quite good for people. So that's good, but I think there needs to be next step to even include Islamic those people who would like to keep their money in Islamic banks.
Yeah, and I guess like it goes back to this whole point that Uzbekistan's only really been opening up economically since 2016, 17, or 2017, and it takes
Yes.
time, to develop other sectors of the economy. Just on the FDI, we mentioned earlier in the conversation about FDI and how the levels have been like really impressive in terms of inflows and in stock of FDI. All the indicators are really positive, even despite global downturn in the economy, global economy, and FDI levels. Could you maybe like give us a little bit of a snapshot on what sectors within Uzbekistan are doing quite well in terms of attracting greenfield or even brownfield FDI?
Sure. Look, I mean, a very important sector is currently power sector. Under PPP modality, we are seeing billions of dollars FDI flowing into this sector, and I think this is great. Also, chemical products are a big recipient of FDI. Privatization is also driving these FDI flows. I mean, we sold Farganazot for $100 million last year, and this is also a quite good, let's say, case study in a way that in terms of getting FDI flows into the country. And privatization flow will continue in the coming years to banks, to other not large state-owned enterprises, and that will also bring significant capital into the country in the form of equity. So FDI is quite important. Of course, mining sector attracts FDI. Metals and mining sector, energy sector continues to drive FDI. Machinery and equipment, food production, services.
Mm,
Tourism numbers are increasing very solidly. I think it's 7 million tourists visited Uzbekistan this year, up from 5 million last year.
mm,
It's a great 40% increase, and this is attracting people, to hotels, to other sort of services industry, to the benefit of that large expansion in the services sector. Services sector is actually one of the major drivers of economy in Uzbekistan. So I think this FDI will be quite important driver of growth, driver of efficiency, and I think this with regular inflows, this will obviously will increase.
So you talked about FDI going forward, Odilbek. What are your thoughts for 2023 and 2024 going forward?
For FDI?
For FDI, yeah.
Yes, I think FDI numbers will continue increasing because most of those PPP deals that we signed will see the active phase of investment, right? So there will be more and more FDI figures. I mean, as projects develop, we'll be seeing. Apart from PPPs, as I mentioned, privatization will also bring a lot of FDI.
Yeah.
In my opinion, privatization, which is already happening quite fast, but at the same time now, most of the small and medium-sized government enterprises are up on sale. There will be more focus on banks next year for the chemical industry, fertilizers, and so on. Mining sector will also see growth in FDI. And of course, services sector. So I would say FDI growth will continue its resilient growth. Net FDI numbers, if you look at the central bank statistics, has been around $3 billion. I think the next year, this net FDI flows will also see a good increase to around $4 billion. Again, this is just my guess based on how the how the sort of those projects which have started last year, this year, will continue adding those FDI flows.
And obviously under the new, I think it's the new development strategy, new Uzbekistan development strategy that was launched in 2022. Uzbekistan needs to attract a lot of FDIs in order to keep the economy.
$70 billion, sir.
Yes, that's a lot over a 5-year period.
It's not 100% FDI. It also includes loans.
Yeah.
So $70 billion in total. So I would say of that, it could be 40-60, something like that, 30-70 in favor of loans, right? Because obviously equity is more expensive than the loans. So I think, I mean, if we can get to $4 billion next year, then we can get to around $20-30 billion number in total, just to make up, and the rest will be the loans. And just to give you a context of the economy, the why I think the FDI should accelerate is that next year in 2024 we will become $100 billion economy, 100 billion. So it's kind of quite an important benchmark to pass.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
right. Nominal GDP, and then if it's $100 billion or more, then it's going to be more focused. $100 billion economy, 37 million people, adding every year 700-800,000 people, so growing population, and business friendly and environment, stable FX reserves, as well as high levels of remittances, high levels of economic activity. These are the drivers for FDI. A good tax regime. Now with the tax reforms, taxes have been, all-time lows. If you look at the last 32 years of independence. So there's a lot that investors can, and then of course the large markets, not just Uzbekistan, but also Central Asian, CIS market, Afghan market, which is quite close to us, Middle East. So there's a geography which can expand to larger markets. Where we have a favorable trading regime or favorable trading infrastructure. So the whole thing will probably make sense. And I think, although FDI now mostly on the resources sector still, I'm happy to see over the last years this is also covering sectors like IT, sectors like telecoms, services, and others, just to diversify the sectors that we are receiving. Textiles is a big receiver of FDIs. So that's why I think this is sort of gives me a good sort of feeling about how the FDI flows will grow and improve in coming years.
Mm. One thing that I find interesting about Uzbekistan is that it's, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, it sits on the ancient Silk Road. It's got an interesting place in history, and obviously in today's contemporary world, Uzbekistan is, balancing its relations between, say, Russia, China, and the Western countries. Obviously, Russia is a very important trade partner for Uzbekistan, as indeed China is becoming. Could you maybe talk about how Uzbekistan tries to mitigate between, say, these, three, four global powers, and manages to maintain its trade relations, and manages to navigate geopolitics?
Look, it's a very good question, and I think that I earlier alluded that President Mirziyoyev's active policy, because of his active foreign policy, we have the best relationships ever during the years of independence. Yes, with each and every neighbor. It is important when you sit in Tashkent. World looks very different compared to when you sit in London, in Washington, or in other places. Mm-hmm. Because Tashkent, as you rightly mentioned, is in the middle of the ancient Silk Road. China, geographically, China is close, Russia is close, Middle East is close. Europe and US is a bit far, but nevertheless, we also think they are quite close as well. In a way, we think that the government's strategy is, I think, it's 100% right to balance to have a balanced foreign policy, and I think that this position, even during President Karimov's time, between West and Russia and China, we used to have balanced relationships as well. Mm. Although in the last years it has improved significantly, policymaking and levels of dialogue has improved significantly with all of our larger neighbors, so to speak. So the position is very, very simple. Uzbekistan needs all of their neighbors to have a peaceful and continued progress. Its own economic progress, human capital, ensuring that people are more, prosperous, they get the jobs. We need to create, hundreds of thousands of jobs each year to get our growing population employed. And investments in human capital is one of the largest in our state budget as well. 55% is basically social expenditures, more or less focused on human capital development. So I think we simply have enough problems domestically and enough challenge domestically. Yeah. Let alone taking sides or basically getting involved in geopolitics and stuff like that, which probably is going to be detrimental to Uzbekistan's own progress. So it's in Uzbekistan's interest to be friendly with everyone, with neighbors. Uzbekistan has one of the best relationships with Taliban regime as well. Afghanistan, right? Many people don't recognize Afghanistan, but since US withdrawal, who's running the show there, right? People don't like it. The regime, they're tough. They're, but nevertheless, they are running, and there's 40 million people. They are on our southern borders. Of course, some of the principles that we share, they don't share, but it is what it is, right? Yeah. Some of the principles that the Europeans share, we don't share either. Yeah. But we still have good relationships with Europe, for instance.
Mm.
So in the same way, we should respect their own ideas and hope they will change their stance on some of the most important issues like women's education and other human rights issues. But nevertheless, they are running the show, and they are important country in broader Central Asia. They are our route towards the sea for our exports and imports to Pakistan, and they are the shortest route. They are the shortest route to the Middle East as well.
Yeah.
Through Pakistan to our other markets in the Middle East, in GCC, India. So Uzbekistan is supporting the government to Afghan people with energy resources, with transportation, with pharmaceuticals, with a lot of things that Uzbekistan has been supporting. So in a way, the position is that neutrality and making sure that Uzbekistan is obviously benefiting from bilateral or multilateral relationships is quite important, because each country should think about their own citizens' welfare and benefits to the country before they make any sort of judgment calls in terms of who to support, what to support, and etc.
Sure. As we draw the podcast to a close shortly, Odilbek, I wanted to ask you, what are the challenges for Uzbekistan going forward? Obviously, things like over-reliance on remittance from Russia. I think last time when we spoke, you talked about infrastructure outside of Tashkent, unemployment, the participation of women in the workforce, SOE privatization. What would you say are some of the challenges facing Uzbekistan's economy going forward?
The most acute challenge is climate change, Hassan.
Climate change, yeah.
Those things are more or less, yes, these are the challenges, but you can fight against those things. You can improve those things. You can improve unemployment. You can improve, obviously, depends on remittances. Of course, remittances are important, but as much as our workers need Russia, Russia also need our workers, because they're a declining population. And remittances, I mean, they used to be close to 100%. Now Russia share of total remittances is 70%. Again, still very high, but 30% we are receiving from different other countries, US and Europe and South Korea, Japan, Kazakhstan, Turkey, and now GCC as well. So diversification is a good strategy, but going forward, I think in the next decade, 2 decades, Uzbekistan will continue exporting labor as we have a positive, let's say, surplus of labor in Uzbekistan. Now, climate change is something you cannot fight against. It's unfortunate. You can, of course, this Paris Agreement, net zero pledge in 2050, and all these good things. But this will only help let's say help to limit the growth of temperatures, right? It will not make the planet cooler, if you know what I mean. And Uzbekistan is affected twice as much as the rest of the world, twice as much. If overall temperatures grow by 2%, Uzbekistan is 4%, and it's cold now in winter, but it used to be colder 30, 40 years ago. We used to have snow all over the place. Now we don't have snow. And this is impacting agriculture. This is impacting water, ice caps, which are important for us to get water. In fact, 1/3 of the ice caps have melted away in the last since 1990s. So another 60 years, probably we will not have ice caps anymore if this global warming continues in that pace. So these are all of these issues, if you look at, which will impact generations to come. And this challenge needs to be, is important for the government, and government is looking at it from, and here, you cannot, it's just response cannot be fully mitigating it, right? You will mitigate it somehow, change the way you do agriculture, change the way you spend, water, build reservoirs to keep the rainwater and use groundwater, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not going to solve the whole thing. So, soon to be 40 million nation, and if you look at the Central Asia, 80 million nation would live in a region with much less water, and this is what we need to get used to it, and this will require billions of dollars of investments. So that's why the green bond issuance in October highlights some of those initiatives from Uzbekistan to look at this issue, and it is a global issue, but you need to have local solutions to move on, really. So that's probably would be the biggest challenge. All the rest that you mentioned that we discussed in the past meetings also relevant, but the most acute is climate change.
Very true. Yeah, I think that's so for a lot of countries, not just Uzbekistan. And Odilbek, do you have any final thoughts for 2024? Are you optimistic on your country's prospects economically, or are you optimistic on the future?
I am. I'm always optimist. I always think the glass is half full. It's quite important, and I think we think that we will in Uzbekistan, of course, 2024 we will see more integration of Uzbekistan's financial system with global financial system. I'm hoping that we will be able to get this bridge done with Clearstream, which will allow more capital or portfolio investors coming into Uzbekistan. So again, going back to my own profession, I'm a finance guy. I always look at the finance as a liquid, let's say, as you call liquidity. Money is liquid. So wherever there is you get the bridges, you open the tunnels, you open the pipes, the water flows there. So I'm hoping that this Clearstream bridge will become a pipe between Uzbek financial markets and global investor universe, and I hope that global investor universe would have an opportunity to invest in Uzbek securities, initially government bonds, in 2024. That will help a lot because this will definitely squeeze interest rates in the Uzbek government bond market. But broadly, of course, there will be more PPP. We are involved in several projects. Hopefully, this will get signed, which will also help day-to-day lives of ordinary people. And hopefully, there's going to be more, let's say, improvement in the way we do policy making, in the way that the reforms will bear fruits. The energy reforms, which was recently enacted, there will be second phase next year. Hopefully, this will also be successful, and this will definitely bring equilibrium in the energy market in Uzbekistan. So I'm optimist, and I think that the structural reforms will continue under President Mirziyoyev's regime. I think that the technocrats, which are in the government right now, especially in Ministry of Economy and Finance and Central Bank, will continue doing their work to improve the business climate, to improve the macroeconomic stability, so that investors can come and work and make money in Uzbekistan.
Odilbek Isakov, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care.